Because it's an occupied country, Nima. The Americans, after the criminal Saddam Hussein, who at the behest, with encouragement of the West, invaded Iran, used chemical weapons against the Iranian people. He then subsequently invaded Kuwait, which paid him hundreds of, I think probably Kuwait and Saudi Arabia paid, just these two countries alone, paid Saddam hundreds of billions of dollars to wage war against Iran. The others did so too, but the major funding came from these two countries. So Kuwait, which helped Saddam, I think Kuwait was tens of billions and Saudi Arabia a couple of $100 billion. Kuwait, which helped Saddam so much, he invaded the country. And that gave the excuse for the Americans to occupy Kuwait. And since the occupation, it's become a protectorate. They have multiple bases there, and they have the bases, from what I've told, are huge, and they have all sorts of equipment. It is, and so the Iranians keep destroying different parts of the base of the bases, but they're massive, and so Kuwait is a center for the United States, and of course Bahrain too. All these regimes are complicit, but Kuwait in particular is where the Americans store huge quantities of equipment and ammunition and that sort of thing.
Yeah, the
HIMARS missiles are often are fired from Kuwait, often into Khuzestan, into cities which your relatives live and your acquaintances live, and where you go to, where you went to recently. They're struck from Kuwait.
Yeah, they're mostly focused looking at multiple cities were hit by these HIMARS in Khuzestan. I assume the United States is using those HIMARS, but in the southern, it's basically they're using fighter jets. But in the western, they're using HIMARS and these systems to hit the targets in the western part of Iran. And when you look at the Iranian targets, it seems Iran is so much focused on Kuwait. 70% of the attacks targets are in Kuwait. Then Bahrain and Jordan. There was a single report yesterday that Iran hit, logistics in Saudi Arabia, but not that much of attack on Saudi Arabia and UAE. What does that mean?
Well, I can't say with certainty. I don't have details. I do know that Iran had some negotiations with Saudi Arabia, with the Emirates, with Qatar, which had some results. But then again, Iran has struck Qatar, Iran has struck Saudi Arabia. So I think the calculations are complicated. But at the end of the day, when Saudi Arabia allows the Americans to use their airspace and their bases to attack Iran, it's not going to, the Iranians are not going to be indifferent to that. So the Iranians prioritize, maybe it's because of the negotiations that were more successful in some places and less in others, but I think it has more to do with the imminent threat to Iran. I think the bases in Jordan were a major threat, so the Iranians prioritized Jordan. And the same is true with Kuwait and Bahrain, because the U.S. naval base in Bahrain is also massive. It's huge. And it also contains huge quantities of American equipment and ammunition. So I think it's probably multiple issues, but I have no doubt that if the United States intensifies the war, if it escalates, if it starts striking bridges, and I mean, so far the Iranians, ever since Trump made his threat that for every ship they're going to strike a bridge or a power plant, so far the Iranians have struck 2, and the Americans have not responded. And since last night, the Americans have not been. They've gone quiet. Now, why? I don't know. That remains to be seen. But They may carry out a massive operation, and they may not. I just don't know. But I'm sure. I'm sure, though. I know that messages are going back, and I know that that the messages that Americans have obviously said things through the delegations that have visited Iran. But of course, as the Iraqi Prime Minister's office said, that the New York Times report was nonsense. But definitely, messages are going back. The Americans are pushing hard to have communications with Iran. But the problem is, of course, Trump's ego and the Zionists.
They're fighting the war to the last interceptor. And it seems that the footage yesterday came out, there is no interceptor going to hit the Iranian missile that was supposed to hit a target in Bahrain, for example. And you see the Patriot system trying to hit the missile, Iranian missile failed and hit the neighborhood. And instead of hitting the Iranian missile, there is no, I think what is obvious for us that are watching this footage and photos coming out of the region, it seems that the United States has depleted the air defense system. The air defense system is not working properly anymore. That is one of the problems for all GCC countries right now.
Well, the Yemenis, they struck, as they said, with tens of missiles. You said that tens of missiles and drones and cruise missiles. Well, where were the interceptors? Why couldn't they down these things? So they're in serious trouble. And then again, I remind you, which I know you know, but I'm just reminding you and myself, that the resistance in Iraq is pretty quiet, but they're prepared. I mean, they've been striking Kuwait in a limited fashion, but and American assets in Iraq, but they haven't started yet. And the Iraqis are much tougher than the Saudis, and the Yemenis are much tougher than the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Kuwaitis. The rest of them, their armed forces are a joke. Qatar, it's just an empty shell.
Yeah. Do you see any sort of possibility if the case of Kuwait continuing with the same sort of policy, maybe Iraq doing the resistance in Iraq doing something in Kuwait?
Yes, I think it's possible that the Iraqis believe that Kuwait belongs to Iraq, and if the Iraqis take Kuwait, I have no doubt that the Iranians will support them. So Kuwait is walking on very thin ice. I mean, all these regimes in the Persian Gulf, including Oman, they're walking on very thin ice. They will not survive if this continues. And when these regimes collapse, then you're going to have the map will change, and we're going to have a different situation. But the upper hand will obviously be with Yemen. I mean, they've survived a genocidal war. What is Saudi Arabia going to do to them? What's the United States going to be able to do to them? We see how Iran has been fighting over the past 5 months. It's just for the United States, it will be for the Israelis, it will be catastrophic. But again, it goes back to what we've been discussing previously. Why is the Israeli regime pushing for all this? I think it's because Netanyahu and his people, they just want to remain in power. But in my opinion, they're destroying the Israeli regime by weakening the United States, by weakening U.S. proxies in the Persian Gulf. They're not going to get any stronger, but the resistance will grow stronger. No doubt. I mean, look at Yemen today and compare it today with 2 days ago. It's obviously in a very powerful position. And Yemen's missile bases are all underground like Iran's, and it's mountainous. In other words, bases are much better protected. The mountains make it literally impossible to destroy those bases, just like Iranian underground bases. But also, when you look at the fact that the United States failed to destroy any of Iran's missile bases, that raises the question. And I don't have I'm not privy to, secret information in Iran. But Iran's nuclear installations, which were bombed, those that were deep underground, why should we believe that they were destroyed? I mean, the head of the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency was fired when he basically rejected Trump's claims that they were obliterated. But when all the Iranian missile bases and drone bases and underground factories are intact, why should we believe that the nuclear installations are destroyed? Because it's the same engineers who designed all of these. So why would this one in particular be more vulnerable? So I personally, and it's probably less vulnerable because they don't want, in case of attacks, I mean, the United States and the West, they don't care if people are contaminated with due to an attack on nuclear installations. They don't care about radioactive leakage. They have no humanity. I mean, look at Gaza. Look at the genocidal war they carried out in Yemen. So I think that the Iranians were probably they protected the underground nuclear centers even more than they protected they provided more protection for them, even more than the sort of protection that exists for the missile bases. That's how I see it, at least. Again, it's not based on any information that I have. I don't have any information. It's not based on access to the people who are involved in engineering or anything like that. But when the Americans failed to destroy a single missile base across the country, I mean, I think it was the Yaz missile base that they kept bombing with B-52 bombers, and they got nowhere. So why should we believe that they were able to destroy the underground nuclear facilities? And then Yemen, obviously, its mountainous too, so the sturdy mountains protect their own underground bases. So they're at an advantage to their antagonists, compared to their antagonists, whether it's the Saudis or the Israelis or whoever, or the Americans.
One of the main targets in Iran is Pickaxe Mountain. And they're talking about it. They brought the B-1 bombers from the United Kingdom to the region. If they attack for the first time, it's maybe they're going to use these B-1 bombers, the bunker busters. They're not as strong as B-2, as my understanding is that, based on the information available online. But when it comes, it's not something new for Iran. They attacked the Pickaxe Mountain before, and they're somehow feeling again and again and again, maybe they do something there. And what do we know about the latest attacks on the Pickaxe Mountain, and how effective was that? Because that could be helpful for them for the next round of attacks. And what is the perception on the part of Iranian and the capabilities of the United States to hit that?
Well, first of all, I have no idea what exists under the mountain or the mountains. I have no idea. But two things. One is, this again shows how the West lies and how they're completely dishonest. If, as Trump claimed, the Iranian nuclear program was obliterated and that it will not be able to revive for years, then why, after such a short period of time, are the Israelis now saying that the installations are under this mountain? So they're just lying. They were lying then, and therefore you can assume that they're lying now. But beyond that, regardless of what exists under there, or whether perhaps nothing exists under there, I don't know. I mean, it's not my area of expertise, and again, I'm not privy to that sort of information. But the Iranians have already said, you strike this mountain and you will get a very severe response across the region. Iran has said very openly that the critical infrastructure of the regimes that are complicit in this war, that enabled this war, that have Iranian blood on their hands, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, the Emirates, Oman perhaps, Jordan maybe, that they will be punished. And look at what Yemen did last night and this morning. So if that's what the Americans want to do, they will. If there is something underneath, I doubt they'll be able to destroy it. I doubt they were able to destroy the installations that they bombed in the 3 nuclear installations that they bombed, based on the fact that they couldn't destroy any of the the missile cities and the drone cities and the cities with Iranian military speedboats and so on. So it's just going to create further devastation. And Iran is not going to be intimidated. Iran is not going to back down. Iran will continue the war, and they should have already known this, because again, let's just remember what Trump was saying during the 40-day war. He's going to obliterate Iran. He's going to send it back to the Stone Age. He's going to wipe out the civilization. Did Iran back down? No. The United States ultimately went from unconditional surrender to accepting the Iranian 10-point plan on day 39, 40.